Advanced English Arabic Learning Session 12. Market Codes of Conduct. Strict Prudential Procedures. Purchasing Power Parity. Interest Rate Parity. Creditworthiness. The marketability of securities. Please attempt the questions below. Trade payables. Raising new debt. A water trough. Remotely created checks are susceptible to fraud. Inventories and trade receivables. Debit turnover. There is always a hardcore of trusty stalwarts. A written safeguards. A sole proprietorship dash. A sole proprietor. To issue equity capital. Tax relief is available on the initial investment. She was now a mature woman. A takeover bid. Underwriting fees. An unquoted company. I sent my mother an allotment. He tendered his resignation as leader. Proper placement. The placement was arranged through the bank. Not to contravene company law. The break-even point. Fluke occurrence. A major breakthrough in DNA research. The gas will cool and then accrete to the galaxy's core. Neither side bothered to hide disdain for the opposition. Don't tap into their wireless bandwidth without asking. A storm blew up at an inopportune moment. The older models have now been superseded. Irrespective of the risk, an alternative investment might be undertaken. An inherent operational risk. A company may also try to take account of competitors. I stuck out my tongue and she did likewise. Pestle dash. Offsetting receipts and payments. Under the accord. She pushed a last morsel of toast into her mouth. Knocking down these barriers. The flare-up between the two countries. Huge fines were imposed for trivial offenses. Segregated school system. A mustard seed. Instinctively. She's the spitting image of her mother. Her favorite place was the foster care center. A delightful secluded garden. He crouched beneath an overhang of bushes. A concrete path overhung by trees. Effective oversight of the financial reporting process. The impairment of assets. I am just doing sit UPS. New coach. It is fueling speculation. She is a women's bantamweight champion. An absolute abomination. Severed hand. Inbound tourists. An all-encompassing package to combat global warming. African customary law. The arbitrariness of the rule of man. What is scarlet fever? Unconscionable conduct. The hallmarking of precious metals. The hallmark of his refereeing. Codes that provide the hallmark of civil law. The Court of Cassation. The statute is obscure or ambiguous. Stood at the podium to deliver his speech. The League of Nations. The two men were not in the same league. Repugnant to the injunctions of Islam. Permissible within the bounds of the Sharia. His followers were persecuted by the authorities. The plaintiff, claimant, sues the defendant. The tiny bubbles are the hallmark of fine champagnes. An apprehensive glint in his eye. They knelt down and prayed. I had to kneel on it to get it closed. One of the things I inferred from the article was, you have to be keenly attuned. A badge of shame. To allocate an allotment. Occur simultaneously. The deterrent effect of prison sentences. Heart-rending stories dash. Lessees or tenants. Centrally allocated overheads. To improvise solutions from the materials at hand. The work is spontaneous and improvisatory. Their morale was high. Less contribution foregone. To undermine their morale. Staff morale was at rock bottom. The accumulated profits. The cumulative profits. He called actors to improvise dialogue. He was surrounded by a horde of relatives. Two mutually exclusive investments. This solution can be illustrated diagrammatically. Our own homegrown poultry. A terribly clumsy fellow. Rebelling against the bland uniformity. He is cold and indifferent to the problems confronting his family. To become callous and indifferent to the suffering of others. A colossal amount of mail. They deferred the decision until February. Voyagers who crossed the sea in flimsy boats. The stout-hearted man. Financial intermediary. Financial mediator. Diversified portfolios covering a varied range of securities. A supervisor appointed to oversee the works. A regulatory body with powers conferred by Gov. Laws that confer rights and impose duties. Conferring the honorary degrees. Components are listed in ascending order of risk. We watched the locals glide down the slopes. The risk of default is negligible. Government bonds would be deemed least risky. He searched the house thoroughly. I thoroughly enjoyed the day. Read the question thoroughly. They were at variance with all their allies. Last but not least, try not to be at variance with anyone. She outlined the case briefly. New contracts for the provision of services. Low levels of social provision. A key provision in civil rights law. Our provision of fuel. The male partner will provision his mate with food. The army did not provision itself well and was quickly short on water. An ad hoc committee. There is no set procedures. A set of false teeth. Dana set the mug of tea down. A perfect lady just said, sit in her seat and stared. He's handy with a needle dash. A provisional government. Routine preventive maintenance. A diesel locomotive. For 2 days there had been a lull in the fighting. The rhythm of the boat lulled her to sleep dash. I beckoned to the girls, and they followed me upstairs. Guitar strings kept snapping. He planned to spend the time snapping rare wildlife. A snap judgment dash dash. Take a snapshot of the scene. He snaps the ball. Remote places beckon and enchant us. He reckons that the army should pull out entirely. His debts were reckoned at $300,000. To renounce his faith and convert to Islam. The expected yield from new enterprise. Bonds or loans denominated in other currencies. Which of the following is least likely to be chosen? I want to renounce my rights as heir. He renounced his allegiance to Syria. The assassination squad. Air Force with 4 squadrons. I devoutly recommended my spirit to its maker. He became the regimental adjutant. Feudal lords. Dividend payments are discretionary cash outflows. A loss-making company. This approach has a 0 defects. The all-pervasive nature. Restriction on QP subsidiaries have lifted. Each employee is responsible for defect-free production. Selling faulty goods. Prudent use of natural resources. Impact of activities on biodiversity. She rammed her fist in his stomach. Get things right first time. Doctors prescribe medicines to relieve symptoms. The strictly prescribed norms. The prospective demand. Rather than prescription there would be guidance. A consistent basis. The standards gained more prominence. Careworn faces. Interrelated objectives. He prescribes prescriptions. A conceptual framework. The standard setter acceded to pressure. The baby's due in August. We'll head due south again on the same road. He attracts more criticism than is his due. Driving without due care and attention. He had paid union dues for years. Financial commitments will fall due. The hospital is due to open this month. They take their due from the owners. He was given the respect that was due. His views are highly subjective. How this man will be dealt with. He shunned fashionable society. Misinterpretation of facts. Restating the opening balances of assets. The end. Coming next. Session 13.